All right, so one of the tricky things is getting the proper blower rotational speed. So there's a bunch of calculators on Vortech's website that allow you to calculate the impeller speed based on the crank pulley and on the supercharger pulley. So what I have here is the Vortech pulley. Here's your stock accessory drive, and then this is the one, the 6 rib, that's going to be driving the stock Vortech. And then here's the pulley on the Vortech itself. So if you take the measurements, the diameter of this and the diameter of that, that will give you a certain calculation. And then that calculation will be the impeller speed. And basically what you would do is plug that information in, say what your shift RPM is going to be, and it'll basically tell you what the max boost is under your shifting point. The problem is I have a stock crank pulley, and there's not enough room here to run an additional belt in front of that. You could see that this is the accessory belt, and there's basically zero room there. I actually had to notch out the shroud even to get the water pump pulley to clear. So this is regular HO block with the traditional front end. If I did the shorty water pump, different timing cover from, I think, what, 94 or 95, could have gotten a little bit more clearance. Maybe it'd be a different story, but don't really have that luxury, so I'm just going to work with what I have. And for this to happen, I'm going to basically drive the supercharger off of the stock accessory belt. And so I have to take the measurements off the crank pulley, the stock one, and then the supercharger, which is going to eventually sit here. I have to find out what pulley size to use for that to get roughly the same speed that I would be getting with the stock setup off the Vortech. So I'm going to do some quick math and hopefully figure this out. Okay, as far as the calculations for the impeller speed, on Vortech's website, like I said, there's an impeller speed calculator where you put in the pulley size of your crank, the blower pulley, which is, again, it's going to be this, and there's your crank pulley, as well as the shift point. So for my engine, I'm using 6,000, and these are basically the numbers I got. So with the stock Vortech, 708 inches, blower is 3.125 inches, 6,000 RPMs, yes, I know my finger's dirty, 49,000 RPM impeller speed at 6,000 RPMs. The stock crank is 6.12 inches, and basically if I do 2.7 inch pulley on the Vortech, I'm going to be almost exactly 49,000. I think it's 48.6. Okay, so after a lot of finagling with the supercharger and the mounting bracket, I think I found something that works. Basically, what I had to do is the original bracket has these 5 holes that go around the perimeter, and those match the 5 holes that go around the perimeter of the head. So the plate is actually sandwiched in between these 2 holes, right? And then the outside I use for, I believe, the tensioner, and then the inside, these are the ones that mount to the stainless plate, right? What I found is if you enlarge the hole here, you can reuse at least that and then drill new holes to line up to these 3 tabs. That should be sufficient to hold the supercharger. I'm going to see about also drilling through here and getting kind of like a spacer to fill the gap so I can reuse at least a few of these holes, the original ones. But that actually seems pretty secure, and what it allows is the supercharger to sit low in the bracket, which is important for hood clearance. And then also the pulley can be spaced a little bit forward, but it's not too far forward that it's going to be a problem with clearance of the belt as far as like the radiator. The only additional caveat here, I guess, is if you look at the front of the bracket where I had the clearance, it's tight. And so this kind of, you could move up and you could see I had to grind away a good deal of material here. I tried to polish it so it didn't look like a hack job, but you can see that there is a good amount missing there. And then additionally, I've lost these 2 mounting holes. So the only ones that remain are, as you see here, I'm going to have to make sure that I use those and I snug them up. And this one right here, I might use like a stud, just as kind of like a placement dowel out of the head, but I don't think I'm going to have enough room on the inside for a fastener, because once this is in here, you know, you'll see that there's no clearance. So it's all about compromises at this point. I think this makes the most sense. I'm gonna try bolting it up and see what happens. Okay, so here's where I'm at. Biggest complication so far has been the tensioner and then clearancing for the supercharger housing. Can't really tell in this light, but I actually had to grind away even part of the headlight motor. There's some plastic back here, and basically the compressor housing would have been rubbing, so I had to grind a little bit of the plastic away. I also had to notch the frame, which again is hard to tell in this light, but you could kind of see where the compressor is very close. And so that had to be clearanced to make sure that when I torque the engine, that it's not going to be rubbing on the frame. So kind of a hassle, but you just want to be sure. You want to account for any engine movement, right? And the tensioner. So the challenge here is I want to use the accessory belt to drive the supercharger. Obviously this is a 8 rib, and I have a 6 rib belt. I think this is a 6 rib, yeah, 6 rib. So I have a new supercharger pulley I'm going to be buying off of 928 Motorsports. It's also impregnated with a type of a rough material that'll make the belt grip a little bit better. So that's still on the table. I have to order that still. I just wanted to make sure I was good with the math, and then order that because they're around $100 each. So I'll do that. This is the pulley, the tensioner pulley that came with the kit, and there's a very elaborate. I shouldn't say elaborate. It kind of looks it, but it's really not. This bolts to the supercharger. This is kind of the one bolt that's on the head, and then there's those other 3 bolts I'm actually using to mount the supercharger that would go through these slotted pieces. And basically this allows you to kind of pivot the tensioner, combined with a simple little tensioner mechanism like this. Okay, so with the tensioner that comes with this is adjustable manually, right? And so you would torque it down, and then you would just kind of tighten that little tensioner assembly, and then it would exert pressure on the bracket, and then ultimately push this against the belt. Since I'm using the accessory belt that comes with the 5.0, this is an auto tensioner. It has a range. I'm using the auto tensioner to push down on the belt as it's looping over the AC compressor. So this is basically going to be pushing down on the belt this way. Since that's going to be happening, I figured, you know, I don't want to just arbitrarily drill a hole, but this is the hole that made the most sense, and I just hard mounted the tensioner pulley from the kit in this one fixed position. So this is not adjustable, because this is adjustable. And I figured I'd want to keep it close at proximity to the supercharger pulley, just to eliminate any deflection here in the belt. And so that would also keep the most tension on it. Kind of seems like it would make the most sense. It doesn't hit anything, so it's kind of in a good spot as far as clearance. And then obviously, as you can see, it's very close to the fan, but there is room. So I did test it by just kind of pushing this all the way back, wrapping the belt around, and then you could see that the belt did tense up to the point where it was actually, this bolt bracket isn't fully bolted in, but it was flexing. It was putting a good amount of pressure on it. So fairly confident that it'll work. Worst case, maybe I'll have to slot this so that this could also be manually adjusted on top of the auto tensioner. But we'll see. There's a lot of room, a lot of meat on this, so I could probably just drill another hole if I needed to and position it elsewhere. But for now, that looks like it'll work. Oh, and also you can see I wrote grind on here. Everything is tight, as you could imagine. So like even this bolt, this is the factory bolt, you can see it's rubbing the thermostat housing. So you just want to make sure that you're checking all the tolerances or clearances on everything, and making sure that you're grinding away and shifting things as necessary. Okay, so we'll see how this goes.